In this episode, we examine why an influencer let a Sherpa die on the mountain, from a sponsored climber who took his guide's headlamp and left him in darkness, to a filmmaker whose final shot at the summit ended with the rope slipping through frozen hands. By first light, the rescue team discovered the most devastating scene imaginable. It was April 14th, 2016. Mount Everest's South Col route was entering peak climbing season. The standard route from the Nepal side was crowded with climbers, taking advantage of a brief weather window before the monsoon season arrived. Jared Pollson was 28 years old, a travel influencer who had built a following by documenting adventure trips around the world. He had no prior high-altitude mountaineering experience beyond a few guided treks. This Everest attempt was his most ambitious project yet, heavily sponsored by outdoor gear companies that required regular content updates and summit proof. Karma Tamang was 34 years old, a climbing Sherpa from a small village in the Khumbu region with 5 years of high-altitude experience. He had completed 4 Everest summits and was still building his reputation in the climbing community. He was supporting Jared's expedition as part of a 3-person Sherpa team hired through a budget expedition company. Karma had 3 children in school back in his village, and he was saving money for his eldest daughter's education. The work was dangerous, but it provided opportunities his family wouldn't have otherwise. At 26,000 feet in the death zone, the human body begins dying cell by cell. Oxygen levels dropped to roughly 1/3 of sea level. Temperatures hovered at -30 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chill reaching -60 degrees Fahrenheit. High-altitude pulmonary edema can develop within hours as fluid fills the lungs. Breathing becomes labored and rapid. Lips turn blue, and a distinctive gurgling sound emerges from the chest with each breath. Without immediate descent, victims typically die within 12 to 24 hours. The nearest medical facility was Base Camp, a full day's descent away. The trouble began at Camp 3, situated at 24,000 feet. Karma was breathing heavily, coughing more than normal for the altitude. He suggested an extra acclimatization day, a standard precaution when symptoms appeared. Jared refused, citing his upload schedule and sponsor commitment. The next day at Camp 4, at 26,000 feet, Karma developed a persistent wet cough overnight. By morning, he was breathing rapidly, over 30 breaths per minute. His lips had taken on a faint blue tinge, a warning sign that his blood wasn't carrying enough oxygen. When Karma told Jared he needed to descend immediately, Jared was filming and insisted they continue for just 2 more hours. The summit was close, and the footage would be the centerpiece of his content. He offered Karma a substantial cash bonus to continue. Karma, thinking of his daughter's tuition and the financial security the bonus would provide, agreed. Other Sherpas on the route noticed Karma struggling, but assumed Jared would handle his own team member. At 27,500 feet, just below the summit early in the morning, Karma collapsed while fixing ropes. He was gasping desperately, producing a wet, gurgling sound with each breath. Pink, frothy sputum appeared at his mouth, a classic sign of pulmonary edema, where the lungs fill with fluid. Jared filmed for nearly a minute before checking on Karma, his camera later showing him asking if Karma could continue just a little further to the top. Karma couldn't stand. His breathing was rapid and shallow, his chest heaving with effort. He needed immediate descent and supplemental oxygen. Jared had 2 oxygen bottles, one partially used, one full backup. He kept both, reasoning he needed them for the summit push and his own descent. He radioed Base Camp, reporting that Karma needed help, but then continued upward toward the summit. Jared reached the top and spent several minutes filming various angles, sponsor messages, and emotional reactions. On his descent, he passed within 200 feet of Karma's location, but didn't stop, later claiming he thought other climbers would provide assistance. 2 Sherpas from another expedition found Karma hours later. He was unconscious, barely breathing, his lips dark blue. They had no extra oxygen to spare and couldn't move him alone at that altitude. Each step at 27,000 feet requires enormous effort, and moving an unconscious person is nearly impossible without proper equipment and multiple people. Karma died nearly 7 hours after his initial collapse. The medical examination determined death by high-altitude pulmonary edema with severe hypoxia. Fluid had completely filled his lungs, and tissue samples showed prolonged oxygen deprivation. Medical experts stated survival was highly likely with immediate descent and supplemental oxygen within the first 2 hours. Jared's camera footage was reviewed by authorities after Karma's family filed a formal complaint, clearly showing his decision to continue upward despite having oxygen available. The footage was sealed as evidence during legal proceedings and never released publicly out of respect for the family's wishes. Jared was permanently banned from obtaining climbing permits in the country. The family received compensation through legal proceedings that concluded nearly a year later. It was September 22, 2015. The Annapurna circuit in Nepal was experiencing unseasonably early snowfall. Thorong La Pass, the highest point of the trek at 17,769 feet, was becoming increasingly dangerous as fresh snow accumulated on the narrow trail. Autumn Breslin was 33 years old, a wellness blogger who had built an audience promoting intuitive healing and natural approaches to health. She had completed several multi-day hikes, but had no experience with high-altitude trekking. This circuit trek was meant to showcase her philosophy of listening to the body's wisdom rather than following conventional medical advice. She had been posting daily updates rejecting what she called fear-based altitude protocols. Sonam Gurung was 36 years old, a trekking guide from Manang with 8 years of experience on the circuit. He had guided the route 31 times and was supporting his younger brother's education and his aging parents. He had taken this job through a trekking agency, and Autumn had specifically requested someone open-minded about alternative approaches. Thorong La Pass sits at 17,769 feet, high enough for serious altitude sickness to develop rapidly. Acute mountain sickness can escalate to high-altitude cerebral edema within hours. The condition causes brain swelling as fluid leaks from blood vessels into brain tissue. Victims become confused and disoriented, lose coordination, and cannot walk in a straight line, experience severe headaches, and can slip into a coma. Without immediate descent of at least 2,000 feet, death typically occurs within 12 to 24 hours. The temperature was 18 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind gusts to 45 miles per hour. The nearest medical post was a 6-hour descent on the far side of the pass. The problems began at Manang, situated at 11,500 feet. Sonam insisted on a 2-day acclimatization stop, the standard protocol before attempting the pass. Autumn refused, posting online that conventional approaches overcomplicated the body's natural wisdom. 2 days later, at Thorong Phidi, the last stop before the pass, Sonam woke with a severe headache and nausea, early altitude sickness symptoms. He told Autumn they needed to descend back to Manang immediately. She insisted her energy work would help and spent an hour having him try breathing exercises instead of descending. The next morning before dawn, Sonam was vomiting repeatedly and clearly disoriented. Autumn insisted they start the pass crossing anyway, saying the sunrise content was essential and that fear created the illness. Higher up, roughly 2 hours into the climb, Sonam stumbled repeatedly and couldn't walk in a straight line, veering left and right on the trail. This was ataxia, a hallmark sign of cerebral edema. Autumn filmed him from behind, narrating about the ego's resistance to transformation. At 16,400 feet, Sonam collapsed in the snow. He was mumbling incoherently, couldn't recognize Autumn, and had lost bowel control, signs of severe brain swelling requiring immediate descent. Autumn spent nearly 20 minutes filming herself performing energy healing on Sonam, hands hovering over his body while he lay motionless. The footage was later recovered from her phone. A group of 4 experienced trekkers arrived shortly after. They immediately recognized cerebral edema and began preparing to carry Sonam down. Autumn told them he was in a healing crisis and that physical interference would block his process. The group ignored her and started organizing the evacuation. Autumn physically blocked them, standing in their way and saying they were disrupting his energy field. The confrontation lasted several minutes while Sonam lay in the snow. By the time they began descent, Sonam was unconscious and unresponsive. They carried him using a makeshift stretcher, fashioned from trekking poles and a sleeping bag, descending over 1,000 vertical feet, over 90 exhausting minutes. At approximately 15,200 feet, Sonam stopped breathing. Resuscitation attempts continued for 20 minutes, but failed. He died roughly 2.5 hours after his collapse. Sonam's body was carried down by porters the following day. The medical examination determined death by high-altitude cerebral edema with severe brain swelling and prolonged oxygen deprivation. Time from critical symptoms to death was approximately 2.5 hours. Medical experts stated that immediate descent when symptoms first appeared would have likely prevented death, as descent is the only effective treatment. The 4 trekkers provided detailed written statements. Sonam's family filed criminal negligence charges, but Autumn left the country within 48 hours before formal charges could be processed. The family received partial compensation through a victim assistance fund. It was October 8, 2017. The Khumbu icefall on Mount Everest's South Col route was experiencing increased serac activity due to warmer than normal autumn temperatures. The massive ice formations were shifting more rapidly than usual, creating unpredictable hazards throughout the route. Colin Ashford was 31 years old, a freelance photographer working on a long-term project documenting climate change's impact on Himalayan glaciers. He had published work in several outdoor magazines and was hoping this project would establish him as a serious conservation photojournalist. Colin had basic mountaineering skills and had completed 2 previous trips to base camp, but this was his first time entering the technical icefall itself. Sherpa Lama was 29 years old, a member of the icefall route maintenance team with 4 years of experience working in the dangerous terrain. He was one of the specialists responsible for fixing ropes and ladders through the constantly shifting ice. Sherpa was engaged to be married in 3 months and was working extra contracts to pay for the wedding and a small house. He had agreed to guide Colin through the icefall because he respected the conservation mission and believed the documentation was important work. The Khumbu icefall is a 2,000-foot section of constantly moving glacier ice. House-sized blocks called seracs can weigh 20 to 50 tons and collapse unpredictably. Crevasses can be 100 feet deep or more. The safe crossing window is 2 to 6 a.m. when cold temperatures stabilize the ice. After sunrise, warming causes dramatically increased collapse risk. Colin hired Sherpa specifically for his icefall expertise and explained his documentation project. Sherpa set strict rules: enter at 2 a.m., exit by 6 a.m., no exceptions. They made 2 successful crossings, building trust. On October 8th, they entered early in the morning. Colin was photographing a massive serac with visible fracture lines, exactly the evidence his project needed. As sunrise approached, Sherpa said they had to leave immediately. Colin asked for 10 more minutes to capture the sunrise light on the fractured ice. He genuinely believed the shot would help raise climate awareness. Sherpa, who respected the mission and had come to trust Colin, agreed. Minutes later, Colin was still shooting. Sherpa urged him to move. Colin asked for 2 more minutes. A deep groaning sound echoed through the icefall, ice under stress from warming. Sherpa grabbed Colin, and they started moving quickly toward the exit. Moments later, the serac Colin had been photographing collapsed. The impact triggered a chain reaction in the unstable ice around it. A cascading wall of ice blocks tumbled toward them. Sherpa pushed Colin toward a protected area behind a stable ice ridge and dove in the opposite direction. The collapse created a new crevasse between them, approximately 15 feet wide, impossible to jump. Sherpa was trapped on an isolated ice platform, surrounded by fresh crevasses and fractured ice still settling. Colin was safe but couldn't reach Sherpa. He could see him clearly, about 40 feet away. Sherpa appeared uninjured but was trapped. Colin had a radio. The rescue team was at least 90 minutes away, and the ice was still actively shifting. Sherpa shouted for Colin to leave and send help from safety. Colin stayed, trying to find a safe route across. He spent over 20 minutes attempting different approaches, documenting his attempts on camera, calling encouragement to Sherpa. The continued warming destabilized the ice further. The platform Sherpa stood on fractured and dropped suddenly. Sherpa fell approximately 70 to 80 feet into a crevasse. Colin heard the impact echo from below, but couldn't see him anymore. Colin immediately radioed base camp, then spent nearly 40 minutes trying to rappel into the crevasse using his climbing rope. The crevasse was too narrow and the walls too unstable. Loose ice kept breaking away. He could hear Sherpa calling out weakly for several minutes, then silence. The rescue team arrived hours later with specialized equipment. They extracted Sherpa's body mid-morning. Colin was evacuated, suffering from shock and severe frostbite on 3 fingers from his bare-handed rescue attempts. The medical examination determined death by massive blunt force trauma from the fall, multiple fractures to the skull and spine, along with severe internal bleeding were found. The combination of traumatic injuries and hypothermia meant death likely occurred within 15 to 20 minutes. Colin's camera contained time-stamped photos and video showing the entire sequence and his rescue attempts. His radio logs confirmed his immediate call for help. The route maintenance team reviewed the incident and determined it was a tragic accident caused by the delayed departure from the danger zone. The camera footage was turned over to authorities and later destroyed per the family's request. Furba's family received compensation from Expedition Insurance and additional funds from Colin personally. So if you enjoyed diving into these insane stories from the world's most dangerous peaks, make sure to subscribe because we've got tons more jaw-dropping tales coming your way. It was May 19th, 2014. Lhotse, the fourth highest mountain in the world, at 27,940 feet, was experiencing a brief weather window after a week of storms. Climbers were racing to take advantage of the clear conditions before the next system moved in. Cody Harmon was 26 years old, an extreme sports influencer who had built a following, documenting high-risk activities for his energy drink sponsor. He had limited high-altitude experience, one successful climb of a smaller peak, but was attempting a speed ascent of Lhotse for promotional content. His sponsor contract required summit proof and specific product placement in photos and videos. Cody saw this climb as his breakthrough into elite mountaineering sponsorships. Dorje Rai was 44 years old, a high-altitude climbing Sherpa with 9 years of experience and 7 8,000-meter summits. He was the oldest and most experienced of Cody's 3-person support team. Dorje was the primary breadwinner for his extended family of 9, including his elderly mother and his late brother's 3 children. He had planned to retire after 2 more seasons but needed the income. Above 26,000 feet, the death zone offers no margin for error. The human body cannot acclimatize and slowly deteriorates. Exhaustion sets in rapidly, and decision-making becomes impaired. Wind speeds were gusting to 50 miles per hour with extreme wind chill. Frostbite can occur in under 10 minutes on exposed skin. Supplemental oxygen is critical for survival, as the air contains only 1/3 the oxygen available at sea level. Summit day began late at night. Cody's turnaround time was set for 2 p.m., standard protocol to ensure descent in daylight. By early afternoon, positioned at 27,400 feet, they were 45 minutes from the summit but behind schedule. Dorje said they needed to turn around immediately. Cody refused, saying his sponsor contract required summit proof. They summited around 2:30 p.m. Cody spent 20 minutes filming content, doing sponsored poses with product placement, recording video messages. Dorje repeatedly urged him to descend. Descent began around 3 p.m. Already dangerously late, daylight would last until early evening, but temperatures would plummet after sunset. By mid-afternoon, at 26,800 feet, Dorje's oxygen bottle ran empty. Cody had 1 full bottle remaining. Dorje asked to share it. Cody refused, saying he needed it for his own safety and that Dorje was experienced enough to manage without it temporarily. Without supplemental oxygen, Dorje's pace slowed dramatically within 30 minutes. He was taking 10 to 15 breaths for every single step. His lips turned blue. His movements became sluggish and uncoordinated. By late afternoon, at 26,200 feet, Dorje collapsed on a small ledge. He was conscious but couldn't stand. His speech was slurred, his coordination gone, severe hypoxia setting in rapidly. Cody's 2 other Sherpas were several hundred feet below, having descended ahead to prepare camp. Cody radioed them, but told them to stay at camp and prepare hot drinks, claiming he didn't want to risk more people coming back up. Cody told Dorje he would descend quickly and send the other Sherpas back up with oxygen. He took Dorje's headlamp, saying he needed 2 lights for safety. He left shortly after. Dorje was left alone at 26,200 feet, without supplemental oxygen and without a headlamp as darkness approached. Temperature was dropping rapidly. Cody reached camp after dark. He told the other Sherpas that Dorje was resting at a safe spot and would descend in the morning. He didn't mention Dorje's collapse, oxygen deprivation, or the missing headlamp. The Sherpas, trusting Cody's assessment, didn't go back up. Dorje spent the night at 26,200 feet, without oxygen, shelter, or light. His body temperature dropped steadily. Hypoxia damaged his brain and organs progressively. He likely lost consciousness around midnight. The two Sherpas ascended at first light. They found Dorje in the morning, frozen, in a seated position against a rock. He had removed his gloves and partially unzipped his downsuit. Paradoxical undressing, a sign of severe hypothermia, combined with hypoxia-induced confusion in the final stages. The medical examination determined death by combined severe hypoxia and hypothermia. Core body temperature at discovery was estimated at 75 degrees Fahrenheit. Time of death was estimated between midnight and 2 a.m., roughly 7 to 9 hours after being left alone. Medical experts stated survival was possible if oxygen had been shared and descent initiated when Dorje collapsed. The two Sherpas provided detailed written statements. Cody's helmet camera footage showed him taking Dorje's headlamp and leaving. The footage was retained by authorities and never released due to ongoing legal proceedings with confidentiality agreements. Cody's sponsor terminated their contract immediately. Dorje's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit that settled out of court. It was March 11, 2018. Makalu, the fifth highest mountain at 27,838 feet, was in early climbing season. The mountain's technical summit pyramid was known for unpredictable weather that could change within hours. May Thornton was 37 years old, a documentary filmmaker creating a film about Sherpa culture and the risks they take for Western climbers. This documentary was her passion project, self-funded through grants and personal savings. She believed the film would honor the Sherpa profession and educate people about their contributions to mountaineering. Kaji Norbu was 38 years old, a climbing Sherpa with 10 years of experience and 6 successful 8,000-meter summits. He was articulate, spoke excellent English, and was passionate about changing perceptions of Sherpas from helpers to elite athletes. He had agreed to May's documentary because he believed it would provide a platform for Sherpa voices. Kaji had 2 sons, ages 9 and 12, and dreamed of opening a climbing school to train the next generation. Makalu's summit pyramid is notoriously technical, steep rock and ice requiring advanced climbing skills. At 27,000 feet, exhaustion is extreme and judgment becomes impaired. Weather windows are brief and storms can arrive within hours. The nearest camp was roughly 2,000 vertical feet below and several hours of technical climbing away. Summit day began well. By mid-morning, Kaji and May were climbing on schedule. May was filming extensively. This was the climax of her documentary. Higher up, Kaji noticed cloud formations indicating a storm and suggested they summit quickly. They reached the summit around midday. May wanted extended time for shots. Kaji agreed to 15 minutes maximum. May asked for one more shot, Kaji holding his family photo. Descent began shortly after. On a steep rock and ice section below the summit, Kaji's crampon caught on his pant leg. He stumbled and slid roughly 25 feet before his safety rope caught on a rock horn. The sudden stop wrenched his left leg violently, likely a broken femur. He was in severe pain and couldn't climb down. May rappelled down, administered pain medication, and radioed base camp. The rescue team estimated 6 to 8 hours minimum to reach them. Kaji couldn't descend on his own. May could attempt to lower him using their ropes, but she had only basic rescue training and had never performed a high-altitude rescue. The storm was building rapidly. Within the hour, the storm hit. Visibility dropped. Wind increased to over 50 miles per hour. Snow began falling heavily. May decided to attempt lowering Kaji. She set up a rappel anchor and began the slow process, lowering him 10 to 15 feet at a time, then resetting. After over an hour, they had descended only about 120 feet. Kaji was fading from the pain, cold, and altitude. He told May to leave him. May refused and continued, but her hands were freezing and her judgment was impaired. At 4:10 p.m., May dropped the rope. She was resetting an anchor, her hands numb and clumsy, and the rope slipped through her belay device. It fell 150 to 200 feet down the mountain, disappearing into the storm, completely out of reach. They were now stuck without rope to continue descending. The storm was worsening. May's radio battery was dying from constant transmission. She made one final call at 4:30 p.m., giving their position. They huddled together in a small alcove. May gave Kaji her down jacket and talked to him constantly to keep him conscious. Her camera recorded audio until the battery died at 7:15 p.m. Kaji stopped responding around 9 p.m. He died from combined hypothermia, shock from his injuries, and altitude. May drifted in and out of consciousness until she blacked out around 11 p.m. The rescue team reached them at 8:30 a.m. the next morning. Kaji was dead. May was barely alive, severe frostbite on both hands and feet, and hypothermia with a core temperature of 82 degrees Fahrenheit. She was evacuated by helicopter and spent 3 weeks hospitalized. She lost 4 fingers and 3 toes to frostbite. The medical examination determined death by hypothermia and shock from traumatic leg injury, compounded by altitude. The fractured femur and severe tissue damage from prolonged cold exposure were documented. Time of death was estimated several hours after the injury. Radio logs confirmed her constant communication and calls for help. An official inquiry ruled it a tragic accident with no negligence. May's rescue attempts were deemed reasonable under the circumstances. The footage and audio were never released, as May destroyed all recordings during her recovery due to severe psychological trauma from the incident. Kaji's family publicly forgave May and maintained contact with her. May released a short film using earlier footage, with all proceeds going to an education fund for Kaji's sons. Thanks for watching. If you like these stories, click here